Risking is also important because we want to keep open communication lines with China on issues where we agree, but of course also on issues where we disagree, because this prevents misunderstandings. On issues which we disagree, we have to be very clear. It was mentioned Russia's war of aggression on Ukraine and China's responsibility as a member of the UN Security Council is crucial to uphold the values of the UN Charter and has to be addressed by us. All in all, this means continued engagement with China, but following a European approach that is based on our interests and on our values. Finally, let me emphasize the excellent work, Ulf, that the Swedish presidency did on the migration file. Migration is a common challenge that requires a European response. The general position reached by the Council on the Pact on Migration and Asylum is a watershed moment. Many thanks for the intensive work that has been done here. And we can now take it forward with the European Parliament, and of course we count on the Spanish presidency to bring it to a successful close. You know that this is the legal process. In parallel, we are working on an operational tasks. I have summarized in a letter to the European Council all the different steps that we have been taking since the last European Council. Let me highlight only a few aspects. Centerpiece is that we have to crack down on criminal networks of smugglers and traffickers that exploit human despair. And we should develop alternative pathways to help people come to the European Union on safe ways, because that breaks the business model of the smugglers and the traffickers. For this approach with third countries, we need a new comprehensive approach with the packages that we are able to offer to these countries to work together. And this goes from investment, for example, into renewable energies, often countries with an abundance of resources for renewable energies, to investment in skillings or education or people-to-people contact. At the same time, we aim to step up the cooperation with those countries against migrant smuggling, work on returns, but also have a clear concept on support of talent partnerships, so the legal pathways to Europe. The second element is that we highlighted in a different context our concerted outreach to partners, for example, as we did it with the Western Balkans. They have taken major steps in the last month, thanks to your presidency, to align their visa policy with that of the European Union. And as a result, we see very clearly that since the start of this year, we have seen a reduction of 25% of irregular movements from that region, mainly because of the alignment of the visa policy. Finally, the third element I want to highlight is the strengthening of the external borders and the improvement of the efficiency of the border management, the procedures at the border. Here we have two pilot projects that are set up in Bulgaria and Romania with the support of the Commission, but also Frontex, Europol and the Asylum Agency. They are now up and running, and I hope that these pilots will serve as a best practice to other borders, external borders for the European Union. Again, Ulf, many, many thanks. This was only a part from the vast achievements of your presidency. Thank you very much for the excellent cooperation.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Three simple keywords: safer, greener, freer. To help EU become greener, safer and freer, that was the three priorities when Sweden on January 1st took over the presidency, and that is also what we have tried to stay focused on. I have to say it's been truly both rewarding and great fun, honestly, to be holder of the presidency. Also a lot of hard work, exactly as I expected and exactly as it should be. Of course, I'm not really neutral in this, but I also do believe that this presidency has been successful. So let me simply allow me simply to highlight a few reasons why. First, the unity in support for Ukraine, the European unity and the transatlantic unity, extremely important. To support Ukraine, of course, contributes to a safer Europe in the worst of times. During the Swedish presidency, we have tried to keep this unity among all the 27 countries all the time. We have agreed on a 10th and an 11th, as was mentioned, sanction package against Russia, and we've agreed on 1 million artillery grenades to Ukraine. We've taken initiatives to put the issue of frozen assets, the complicated issue of frozen assets, I should underline, on the table, to some extent be able to contribute to rebuilding Ukraine. And we've negotiated the continuation of the temporary free trade liberalization. And we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, as we always stress. Second, migration. I think we have reached what many perhaps thought was almost impossible, the important agreement in the Council on the Migration Pact, an issue that has obviously divided the Member States for a very long time, ended finally in a surprisingly broad unity, as Charles just mentioned. With this agreement, migration pressure on the EU will reduce, which is important for the entire Union. Another major task during our presidency was to make Europe greener, which brings me to the third reason I want to highlight today. Our ambition was to get one of the world's biggest climate packages done, the Fit for 55, and some people did laugh at the name of it. People don't laugh any longer because people realize how important this is. During the presidency, we have passed the finish line. To be slightly more concrete regarding some of the important parts in this huge climate package, agreement on infrastructure for charging electrical cars in the entire EU, the ban against sales of fossil-driven cars from 2035, more sustainable fuels in shipping and in aviation, and expanded emission trading. More sectors are now being included. But what is most important is not every single act by themselves, but the whole package. There will now be a maximum for all carbon emissions within the Union. All member states will have a climate goal that is regulated by law and has to be followed. This creates a whole new playing field and sets new ground for all EU countries, their own very important efforts. And by 2050, Europe will be the world's first climate-neutral continent. That is a great commitment. And last but not least, I wanted to highlight a fourth reason, a freer Europe. The presidency has continued the work with the rule of law within the EU, not least with the rule of law symposium last week in Stockholm. During the spring, we have managed to put competitiveness also on top of the agenda. Economy is driving a freer Europe as well. European businesses have been lagging behind for the past decade compared to our international competitors, not least in the US and many Asian countries. We see, for example, how the tech industry is dominated by the American West Coast and the Chinese East Coast. But it is my strong view that EU rules are supposed to make it easier, not harder, to run businesses in Europe. And competitiveness have not only been put on the agenda, but we now have a strategy in place and we will follow up on it. I want to finish by reaching out a huge thank you to all my European colleagues, but not least to you, Ursula, and you, Charles, for being so extremely constructive and cooperative. It's been a privilege to serve this presidency. And as I told our colleagues in the room, Ursula, I will miss our Sunday evening telephone conversations. You don't have to be polite and say you will do that as well. But for me, it's been a privilege to have this. So this third Swedish presidency is now over. But the efforts, I think, to make Europe safer, greener and freer, they continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And as is customary, we'll take a few questions from our Swedish colleagues first. Andreas Liljeberg, I hope I pronounce it well, from Radio Sweden. Please, Andreas.
Thank you. Lilja Heden, but it's a difficult name. A question for Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, but also the President on migration, if I may. The deal on migration is seen as one of the major achievements during the Swedish presidency, but the decision was taken by a qualified majority. And we've seen the last couple of days, and also here at the summit, that at least two countries are not very happy with that. And one can also draw parallels to the decision a couple of years ago with the temporary mechanism for relocation, which really divided member states deeply. So my question is: do you think that was it really worth was it worth it to force the decision within the Council to use qualified majority, and or do you fear that this might lead to new divisions among member states? And do you really think that this could be that you could agree on this in the trialogues before the EU election? Thank you.
Well, the answer is absolutely yes. It was not only worth it, it was necessary. I think we had a very broad majority in the Council, an even bigger majority now, de facto, 25 out of 27 countries. Then we fully respect the rules that we play according to, of course. But I think it was an overwhelming support for the decisions that has been made in the Council. So I think this is a very good foundation for the work that still is ahead of us.
Regina, I have a question for you as well, from SVT. Hi.
Regina Svedberg-Ågren, SVT. One question in Swedish, if I may. Det är drygt en vecka kvar till det stora NATO-toppmötet i Vilnius. Och givet den uppkomna situationen med koranbränningen i Sverige, har ni haft några kontakter med Turkiet om detta? Och hur kan det här påverka situationen med det stundande samtalet mellan Sverige, Finland och Turkiet?
Well, the question is, as you hear, obviously about the upcoming NATO summit in Vilnius. Well, in Swedish. Nej, men vi har löpande kontakter med Turkiet, inte minst eftersom vi nu kommer att ha ett gemensamt möte på hög nivå i nästa vecka före Vilnius-mötet. Jag tänker inte försöka gradera detta. Jag tycker att det är uppenbart att allt som är lagligt inte är lämpligt. Jag tycker vi lever i en svår säkerhetspolitisk tid, också för Sverige. Jag tycker man ska besinna sig. Jag tycker man ska agera värdigt mot varandra och få konstruktiv grund för bra samtal. Och där kommer jag ha mitt fokus. Jag tänker inte ge extra uppmärksamhet till de människor som har en helt annan agenda än så.
Christian, vu que c'est ton dernier conseil comme journaliste pour AFP.
La précision est importante, oui. J'ai trois questions et je voudrais commencer par vous, Madame von der Leyen. Vous avez souligné l'unité dans le soutien à l'Ukraine. Moi, je suis très perplexe quand je vois Monsieur Orban dire sur votre proposition de réabonder le budget européen, dans laquelle il y a 30 milliards qui sont destinés à l'Ukraine. Il dit non. Donc, comment est-ce que vous allez faire si Monsieur Orban dit non à l'argent pour continuer à financer l'Ukraine et le soutien à l'Ukraine? Monsieur Michel, vous avez souligné effectivement que des États membres ont dit qu'ils n'étaient pas d'accord avec le mode de décision. Moi, je voudrais savoir si on peut continuer à élargir et à 35 pays, on peut arriver à prendre des décisions avec l'unanimité. C'est un des grands centres de réflexion que vous avez lancé et je ne vois pas du tout d'issue à ce niveau après ce qui s'est passé aujourd'hui. Je trouve que c'est même un message assez catastrophique qui a été adressé à l'Union européenne. Et pour vous, Monsieur Kristersson, vous faites partie d'une coalition et vous avez un soutien à l'extrême droite. Il est de tradition pour une présidence d'être neutre, de faire des compromis et de les faire avaliser. Moi, je voudrais savoir si ce que vous avez adopté sur l'immigration va être accepté par votre aile extrême droite qui vous soutient au Parlement. Merci.
Should I start? Yes.
Yes, please.
So today there was no explicit discussion on the MFF revision, and no specific decision was being asked to be taken by the leaders. Therefore, we are at the beginning of the process and we have to discuss. Fact is, we have an MFF that has been constructed before the big crises. And as you know, it's a 7-year budget and it is totally programmed. Now, within the last 16 months, as long as this war rages now, we have taken from the EU budget 30 billion euros to support Ukraine financially, not to speak of the other activities that we have done. And these have basically been from the flexibilities that we have and the cushions that we have in such a budget. These are now depleted. This lasts till the end of 2023. Now, the political question is that we will have to discuss in the next weeks to come, that the outlook beyond 2023 till the end of the financing period 27, how are we going to support Ukraine? I think this is the main political question that has to be discussed, was not the topic of today, and will first be certainly discussed also with the finance ministers.
Président.
Oui, concernant la deuxième question relative au processus d'élargissement, c'est vrai que les derniers mois, des actes importants ont été posés au travers de décisions. Par exemple, la reconnaissance du statut de candidat pour l'Ukraine et la Moldavie, la perspective européenne pour la Géorgie et des progrès aussi en lien avec les Balkans occidentaux, par exemple. Et donc le processus d'adhésion, il est bel et bien réactivé, bel et bien réveillé. Et ça veut dire en effet qu'au départ du Conseil européen, on a décidé, au départ d'une lettre que j'ai adressée il y a quelques jours, de lancer un processus, une méthode, afin de pouvoir dessiner notre agenda stratégique pour le futur de l'Union européenne, avec un processus qui va démarrer sous présidence espagnole et en principe se clôturer sous présidence belge de l'Union européenne. De quoi s'agit-il ? Il s'agit de considérer que pour l'élargissement, il y a deux éléments qui sont clés. D'une part, les États qui souhaitent rejoindre l'Union européenne doivent faire leur devoir, c'est-à-dire mettre en place des réformes. Et nous sommes clairs, la Commission européenne et le Conseil, sur les attentes que nous avons en termes de standards pour rejoindre l'Union européenne, gouvernance, lutte contre la corruption, séparation des pouvoirs, indépendance de la justice. Sur tous ces thèmes, des devoirs sont nécessaires. Il y a une analyse objective, minutieuse, qui est réalisée avec un rôle pour la Commission et avec une appréciation qui est ensuite exprimée par les États membres, mais également une responsabilité dans le chef des 27 États membres de l'Union européenne. Ce sont nos propres devoirs à réaliser en lien avec ce qu'on appelle la capacité d'absorption, c'est-à-dire le regard sur l'impact que peut avoir un élargissement s'il intervient et quand il intervient sur trois sujets. Nos processus de décision, vous vous y référez aujourd'hui, les politiques qui sont menées, c'est-à-dire ce que l'on fait ensemble, comme Union européenne, et la manière de financer, la manière d'organiser la solidarité. C'est un débat difficile, avec des points de vue qui sont sans doute différents au départ. Mais c'est pas parce que c'est difficile qu'on doit redouter ce débat-là. On a vu, y compris les dernières années, que sur des sujets difficiles, on a chaque fois réussi, grâce au débat démocratique, grâce au respect mutuel, de dégager un certain nombre de convergences, de pas en avant pour progresser. Et effectivement, je suis plutôt confiant que ce débat qui démarre maintenant est un débat non seulement qui est nécessaire, mais qui nous permettra d'arrêter des positions communes qui vont contribuer à renforcer l'impact de l'Union européenne et à consolider ce projet politique.
Prime Minister?
Yeah, I'm afraid my old school French is not sufficient for answering such interesting questions, so I'll stick to English. Well, first, just a word about Sweden and the European Union. I mean, in all countries there is an ongoing, in best case, fresh and vital debate on EU matters, on what should the EU do, what should you not do, what are we doing well and less well. In Sweden, 8 out of 8 parties represented in Parliament are in favor of the Swedish EU membership. That says something. Obviously, there are different views on exactly what to do in Brussels and exactly what to do domestically, but still, there is a very, very strong support. There is also very strong support for what we have done in terms of the migration pact, and also in a formalized sense, since we have a method of anchoring every step we take in the EU in a specific or a special parliamentary committee for every decision being made. So I feel very, very secure and very safe in that.
We have a very large delegation of Ukrainian journalists. Yes, Yevgen Matyushenko, if I'm not mistaken, from Ukraine Forum.
Yeah, I present the National News Agency of Ukraine, Ukrinform, Yevgen Matyushenko. Question to President Michel. We know that the EU has made a political decision to ramp up, first of all, to commonly procure defense equipment, ammunition, therefore to ramp up production. Is there a discussion ongoing between the leaders to involve somehow the Ukrainian defense industry in the process of production of defense equipment, of ammunition, of military equipment, at least to cover some of the needs precisely of the Ukrainian army on the battlefield? So that's the first question. And I have a question to President von der Leyen and Prime Minister Christensen. We also know that the EU generally extensively supports the peace formula proposed by President Zelensky. And we know that the Peace Formula Summit is going to happen one day. But is there any clarity today on the timetable for that summit and on its agenda? And what are the modalities of future security guarantees for Ukraine? Thank you.
This is very clear that I will not share all the details regarding the close coordination between the Ukrainian authorities and the European member states in terms of military cooperation and military coordination. But one thing is absolutely clear: what we are doing with the massive support we are bringing to Ukraine in terms of military equipment is making the Ukrainian army closer to the European Union and closer to NATO. This is what's happening with the decisions we have taken, the fact that we provide military equipment, the fact that we are working on the military production. It goes in that direction. And I'm absolutely confident that we will make a lot of progress, because we understand on the EU side that we really need to adapt our industrial strategy in order to make sure that it will be in line with our ambition for a real European defense.
So we all want peace, and nobody wants more peace than the Ukrainian people, without any question. And therefore it is very good that President Zelensky came forward with the 10-point peace formula. It is an excellent basis or foundation to move on, because every single point, every single word is deducted from the UN Charter or UN resolutions. So broad support globally for the principles that are enshrined in this peace formula. What a peace summit is concerned, it's of course the decision of Ukraine and the Ukrainian government when to table it, when to invite to a peace summit. But I just wanted to flex strong support from our side to what the peace formula of President Zelensky is concerned. The security guarantees will be discussed intensively in the next weeks to come around the NATO summit in Vilnius. I think very important is also as a supporting element for developing security guarantees that Ukraine is impressively engaging in reforms to strengthen the country, to fight corruption, to have a clear program to anti-money laundering, to have a sound, strong judicial system. And as the Commission is following up with the Ukrainian government on the development of these reforms, I can witness that this speed and the determination in which they deliver the reforms is impressive.
I fully share Ursula's assessment.
Katalin Halmai, you had a question as well. You will have to go to the stand. Or stand up, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Barant. I'm Katalin Halmai, Hungarian journalist. I have two questions. The first I would address to the President of the Commission. Arriving in Brussels, Prime Minister Orban posted a video message on Facebook where he asked where the money had gone. He said that Brussels is now asking for billions and billions, most of it for Ukraine, while it cannot account for the budget which it has brought to the edge of bankruptcy. So my question is whether Mr. Orban asked you where the money went. If he did, what was your reply? If he didn't, what would you answer to him? And the second question, if I may, to Prime Minister Christensen. Hungary has delayed the ratification of the NATO accession of Sweden until autumn. Do you think it is a revenge because Sweden, as president of the EU Council, pushed through a qualified majority voting in the Council on two important migration files? Thank you very much.
So to your first question, no, he did not. And what I would have answered, as you asked me, what I would have answered if he would have asked me, is we all can witness that the European Union is strong and prosperous. That is good. And we have a very transparent system of checks and balances. The Court of Auditors, the Parliament, the Council, just to name three. That is very good. This is necessary in a strong democracy. And therefore, we are also so strongly supporting the principle of rule of law, mainly also to fight corruption and to make sure that there is clear accountability and transparency in any kind of institutions that we have in the European Union.
Twice I have spoken to Prime Minister Orban about the Swedish ratification or the Hungarian ratification of the Swedish NATO membership. Last time was yesterday, and both times he has confirmed that Hungary will not delay the Swedish accession. They will not delay the Swedish accession, and I think that is a message that is good enough for me.
Sam from the FTES. Sam.
Thanks. One question on the immobilized Russian central bank assets. There have been concerns expressed by the European Central Bank as well as some member states about the implications of some sort of levy on the proceeds of those assets for the status of the euro and also for financial stability. And I wondered if you could all comment on, first of all, how do you respond to those concerns? And do you think that those concerns can be overcome in order for the 27 to come round a proposal by the end of the year? Thank you.
We had indeed a good debate on the question. It's not the first time that we had the occasion to address the topics of the frozen assets. And I think there is a common goal, a common political will. We think it would be fair to use a part of that money in order to support the future of Ukraine. On the other hand, we are serious and we would like to take into account all the elements that need to be addressed and see two important points. Some comments made by the central bank is one thing, but also the need to coordinate with our like-minded partners. And that's why also in the G7 meeting we had the occasion to discuss that question, to discuss that topic, and what we did on the sanctions, for instance, the very close cooperation, the very close coordination. I think that we need to follow the same approach, and we took note that the Commission intends to make a proposal on the question, and then the democratic process, the decision-making process will allow everyone to decide what will be its position.
So indeed there are two dimensions. The one is the political dimension, and we see the massive destruction that Russia is responsible for in Ukraine, and the perpetrator has to be held accountable. It cannot be that Russia destroys vast parts of the infrastructure of Ukraine and is not contributing to the repair and reconstruction of that. That is the political dimension. Now, the financial dimension, the immobilized assets, indeed, we will have a very prudent approach to work with the windfall profits in close cooperation with our international partners. I think trust is very important. Therefore, we take the concerns and comments of the ECB very serious and into account. That is part of developing the procedure. But I would like to recall that the first and most important step was and is the seizing of the assets itself 16 or 15 months ago. And this is now a long time ago, and the reactions have been very calm. And I think this is also an indication that it is very well understood, the prudent approach that we are choosing. And
allow me only just to add on to that is a good precondition for coming steps and coming decision making is, of course, the high-level group we named to do all the job to investigate exactly how is the situation and what are the legal preconditions.
I have one more question. Maria Audrescu, tu as la dernière question.
Merci beaucoup, Maria Audrescu, pour la Libre Belgique. Je voudrais revenir sur ce qui s'est passé au sujet de la migration. Vous avez dit que beaucoup de progrès ont été engrangés sur ce sujet et pourtant nous avons eu droit à un certain déjà-vu lors de ce sommet européen. La Pologne et la Hongrie remettent en question un processus de décision qui est prévu par les traités, mais annoncent aussi surtout qu'elles ne mettront pas en œuvre un accord qui a été adopté pourtant dans les règles. Donc je voudrais savoir si cette attitude vous inquiète, quels sont les risques que cela pose du point de vue de la gestion solidaire de la migration, mais aussi de manière générale du fonctionnement de l'Union européenne. Merci.
Pour avoir été présent déjà au Conseil européen il y a quelques années, lorsqu'il y a eu des tensions politiques très vives sur les sujets de migration, je peux dire que mon sentiment, c'est que sur le fond, sur la manière opérationnelle d'agir, on a beaucoup progressé. Parce que il y a quelques années, absolument tout était bloqué sur le plan européen. Ici, on voit que d'une part, il y a un pas en avant important qui a été franchi avec le pacte migratoire, validé à la majorité qualifiée, et le président de la Suède a eu raison d'attirer l'attention sur le fait qu'il y a quelques jours, le pacte migratoire est validé avec quelques votes contre et quelques abstentions. Aujourd'hui, il y a un support pour le texte migration exprimé par 25 pays sur les 27. C'est donc un pas en avant additionnel. Mais la transparence nous impose de dire la réalité. La réalité, c'est qu'il y a 25 pays mobilisés pour soutenir le processus, la mise en œuvre du pacte migratoire tel qu'il a été délibéré démocratiquement. 25 pays mobilisés pour agir sur la dimension externe conformément aux conclusions du président qui vous ont été communiqués, et 2 pays qui ont marqué leur désapprobation, et vous aurez l'occasion de les interroger eux directement, mais en tant que garant, comme président du Conseil européen de débats de qualité respectueux, je peux vous communiquer que les 2 raisons principales, telles que j'ai pu les comprendre pour cette position exprimée par la Pologne et la Hongrie, c'est d'une part leur désapprobation sur la substance du pacte migratoire et leur désapprobation sur le processus de décision, c'est-à-dire sur l'utilisation de la majorité qualifiée, ce qui est un résultat des traités, comme vous l'avez mentionné dans la question. Pourquoi ? Parce qu'ils ont, ces 2 pays, une interprétation différente de conclusions antérieures du Conseil européen. Je note qu'il y a 25 pays qui ont la même interprétation de ces conclusions antérieures. Il y a 25 pays qui avancent la migration volet intérieur et volet extérieur. Et il y a 2 pays qui nous ont communiqué qu'ils ne pouvaient pas marquer leur accord pour les 2 raisons que je tente d'indiquer avec une parfaite transparence. Il y a une exigence de sang-froid, de calme, et nous faisons preuve de sang-froid, de calme, et nous allons continuer à avancer. On va continuer à mettre en œuvre. Le pacte migratoire, il est validé. Il devra être mis en œuvre. On espère que le trilogue pourra permettre de faire progresser. Et sur le plan extérieur, moi, je me réjouis de voir l'implication politique au plus haut niveau. Lorsque des chefs d'État et de gouvernement se coordonnent avec la présidence de la Commission, engagent avec les présidents d'États tiers, ça montre une volonté d'être opérationnel, d'être concret dans le rangé des résultats, sur des choses qui sont essentielles pour améliorer la gestion de la migration. Exemple, la question des visas. Exemple, des programmes d'investissement. Exemple, de la coopération pour casser le business model des trafiquants et des criminels. C'est de cela dont il s'agit. Et en cela, le débat de plusieurs heures sur ce sujet-là hier a été utile, parce qu'il a permis de montrer non pas une unanimité, il n'y a pas eu d'unanimité, mais une très large convergence, bien plus grande que les convergences qui étaient en fait qui étaient absolument absentes de la réalité politique de l'Europe il y a quelques années, lorsqu'il y a eu des moments très tendus sur cette question migratoire.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam President and Prime Minister, a special word of thanks also to the Swedish presidency press team, who've done a wonderful job. See you in July.